Hey everybody, Brezzy43 here. I am back. It has been a while. It's been a little over a month actually since my last recording. Life has been crazy busy, but with the weather getting colder here and work being in full swing, I have a lot more time for games now as we move into the winter months. I'm battling a little bit of allergies today, so hopefully it doesn't show through too much in my voice. But I am back for some more Pokemon action. Now, I haven't had the time to play much recently in the last month or so because of life and really busy weekends and busy with work and everything. But I have been keeping up with Pokemon news and I have been thinking about um, some Pokemon action. I might try to get one more Series 10 video up. I have a really cool Lunala team that I've iterated on that I want to try to make a push for high rank on the ladder. Um, but for better or for worse, for whatever you may agree with or disagree with, it's come November 1st, we are moving to Series 11, which is going to be a rehash of Series 8. So now for those of you that don't know, Series 8 was the same thing as Series 10 essentially, where you are allowed one restricted Pokemon on your team, but Series 8 allows for Dynamax. Dynamax I know is a very highly disputed and widely opinionated mechanic in Pokemon in recent years. Um, Due to its balancing issues with how powerful it is, some of the more veteran players really dislike it. Some of them like it and enjoy playing with it. I'm not here to debate about it. I'm just here to share with you some early meta teams that you can use in Series 11. I know that really popular streamers have been putting up tournaments for Series 11 already. There was a Spooky Cup going on that does not involve a restricted Pokemon but does have Dynamax, um, as well as people just getting sick of Series 10 and Series 11's coming back. Now, Series 8, which again is just like Series 11, had some really interesting metagame things happen that also pushed the meta forward, more so than Series 10. Series 10 to me feels like it's a little bit stagnated, where the things that were good at the beginning remained good throughout the whole series, which is just not usually what happens in a metagame. Usually, what happens in a metagame is once the early things have been identified, the early threats, early strategies, people start to build counter teams. Or have modes that can counter what's popular, and we start to see a shift towards things down the line, which is exactly what happened in Series 8. Um, but Series 10 was a little bit different, and that it just kind of stayed the same with everything. So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be sharing with you some popular cores or combos for Series 11 to get you started with your team building, as well as some sample teams that you can use when you're building, just as sort of starting points of tried and true things that have worked. And then I might do another video here shortly after this where I showcase some of the things that I'll be using in Series 11, um, that I personally really enjoy. That is kind of a spin-off of these popular things. So let's go ahead and dive in. First and foremost, we're going to talk about Kyogre Tornadoes. This duo has been really good for a long time, but it's going to be back as sort of the big time Kyogre team as well. But most often, these teams are often paired with Pokemon that want to Dynamax, because Kyogre doesn't always want to Dynamax, right? Kyogre typically will want to click Water Spout and stay on Dynamaxed, which is a really powerful thing for that Pokemon to do. Obviously, Water Spout's one of the strongest moves in the game, especially with speed control. And there's a couple of different ways you can abuse it. Some really common partners that go on this team are like Metagross, or Kartana, as really strong offensive steel types that do want to Dynamax, um, and can take advantage of the rain. Additionally, we've seen Pokemon like Zapdos and Thundurus thrive on these teams as well, just because they are fast Dynamaxers that boost speed with Airstream. Um, Additionally, to note, you can Dynamax your Tornadus as well, using Hurricane for max Airstream. You don't have to, but there are scenarios where you do that. Next up, we've got Groudon stuff. Sun's gonna be back with a vengeance, y'all. There's not really any other way to put it. Um, it may not come with Groudon, it may come with Torkoal and a different restricted Pokemon, but Venusaur is back with a vengeance. So Venusaur, Charizard are the two strongest Sun abusers. You don't need to have Charizard. It is a really potent offensive threat on these teams due to solar power and max Airstream along with max Wildfire. Um, Venusaur was the best Pokemon in the format in Series 8, and it will go back to being that way. Chlorophyll, it gets access to Vine Lash through Leaf Storm, which is Dynamax's whole. There's a handful of Pokemon that do this, but Charizard and Venusaur and Blastoise and Colossal have this G-Max move that sets up a hazard, essentially, for 4 turns your opponent's side of the field. They're Pokemon that don't share a type with the user's move, would take 1/8 of their damage as just removal of their HP every turn. So Venusaur's comes off of Leaf Storm or whatever grass attack, Charizard's comes off of Heat Wave or whatever fire attack, and if your opponent doesn't have a grass Pokemon on their team or in play, their Pokemon take 1/8 of their HP. It just adds up really quickly. It's really strong residual damage. These two pair really nicely with Groudon because Groudon does not want to Dynamax because of Precipice Blades. I do fully suspect that people will go back to running Rock Slide instead of a Fire Attack. If you do run a Fire Attack, run Fire Punch, just because Heat Crash doesn't work on Dynamax Pokemon. None of those weight-based moves will work. Again, I threw Umbreon on here as well, just as a Pokemon that started to rise up in popularity on these Sun teams because of Moonlight getting. It's a really good Pokemon for stalling out your opponent's Dynamax. It's really good at dealing with Trick Room. It's really good against Calyrex. So I definitely wanted to include Umbreon here because I think it is quite good on these teams. Next up, we have Zation stuff. Lapras Zation is a really potent duo that people run. Basically, if you're going to run Zation, you want to run a 1 or 2 really strong Dynamax Pokemon on your team. Lapras Zation was an archetype that I personally really enjoyed using. Lapras gets access to Water Absorb for its ability. Normally you'd run Shell Armor, but Water Absorb allows it to match up exceptionally well into Kyogre. And it sets up G-Max Aurora Veil or G-Max, what's it called? G-Max Resonance off of its Ice attack. And it gets to set up Aurora Veil for several turns, which Zation can take advantage of. And Lapras also is just a Pokemon that kind of has to Dynamax in order to be good, and Zation can't Dynamax, so they're really nice partners. Zation also doesn't really want to face Kyogre, and Lapras does, so that's something to think about. Colossal Zation was another thing that we saw. Colossal will be back with a vengeance. It's one of the best Pokemon that they created in this generation. This duo is really good. Basically, you set up your hazard with Colossal, and the chip damage starts, and then Zation comes in later on and just cleans things up. And the last most common partner we saw for Zation in Series 8 was Assault Vest, Defiant, Thundurus. The idea here is that obviously, Defiant's a really strong ability. You can't intimidate Zation. If you lead Thundurus Zation, your opponent can't intimidate Zation without boosting Thundurus. And Thundurus typically run a flying attack, superpower for fighting, and then Wild Charge, and then a coverage move. And this is really these 3 moves are really good for Zation. Wild Charge protects you from sleep. Fly gives Zation airstream boosts, and superpower gives Zation attack boosts with Max Knuckle. Thundurus, again, this specific build of Thundurus is a Pokemon that has to Dynamax to be good. 115 attack with these moves is just not good, to be honest. Or just to put it frankly, you need to. If you're bringing this Pokemon in, you have to Dynamax it in this iteration of this Pokemon, just because these moves are so bad without Dynamax that you can't. They're just easy to play around. In the case of Fly, Wild Charge does residual damage to yourself. Or recoil damage, excuse me, and superpower lowers your attack and defense. So just keep that in mind as you go with your team building. Next up, I wanted to talk about a little bit of a fringe archetype, but people were doing this bulky offense style of team with either Metagross or Solgaleo. They both function the same way in that their ability prevents your opponent or prevents other Pokemon from reducing their stats. So they can't be intimidated. They can't have their speed dropped. They can't anything like that. Scary Face, things like that don't work. And the idea is to use Entei with Inner Focus, Spectrier, or I did see a little bit of Raikou towards the end on Rain teams, and use Bulldoze. And the idea here is to get a really fast Bulldoze off. All 3 of these Pokemon get Bulldoze, and you give a weakness policy to these 2 Pokemon, and you use Bulldoze to drop the other opponent's speed. and proc your weakness policy and get a really strong attack off. These leads are really immune to fake out, as Spectre's a ghost type, and Entei and Raikou are both have inner focus, and then Dynamax, you can't be flinched during Dynamax. And then Grimmsnarl was just a really common pairing on these teams, just because it's a screen setter. Expect this Pokemon to be back too. By the way, it's gonna be potent. Bulky Pokemon with screens, as well as Sucker Punch to hit opposing Calyrex, as well as to boost these guys with their weakness policy activations. The next one was another kind of fringe one, but it was really strong. Glastrier and Calyrex Ice are Pokemon that thrived in Dynamax by being exceptionally bulky and often running moves that boosted their defenses. In the case of high horsepower, and it gets Heavy Slam, I think. Yeah, it might also get another Steel move too. Smart Strike. Yeah, just run Heavy Slam. Just be mindful of what you're attacking with it. It obviously works as a Dynamax move, but doesn't work on its own against Dynamax Pokemon. But the idea here is that Mimikyu with Mental Herb is an exceptionally reliable Trick Room setter. Dusclops is really good as well, obviously, but Dusclops is going to struggle with Calyrex, whereas Mimikyu is going to be deal with Calyrex really nicely. Well, deal with isn't the right word, but it won't die to it, right? So the idea here is that Mimikyu can set up Trick Room for Calyrex, and then it also typically will run Shadow Sneak to proc Calyrex's weakness policy for Calyrex to sweep. Next up here was just Wheezing Gigas. I just want you all to be prepared for Wheezing Gigas. It's a combination that I think is incredibly underexplored, but I also think is really strong. Gigas has a really bad ability, but phenomenal stats, and Wheezing shuts off all abilities. So essentially, as long as Wheezing's on the field and alive, Regigigas is able to just get these really powerful 160 base power attacks. Typically, we saw Regigigas paired with either Calyrex Shadow or sometimes Zation, just because Gigas, again, wants to Dynamax, and Zation can't, and Calyrex Shadow is one of those Pokemon that is good Dynamax and good not Dynamax, much like Kyogre. And the idea behind Weezing's Neutralizing Gas is that these abilities are good, but not actually all that important. In Intrepid Sword, you can actually proc multiple times with Neutralizing Gas, and you can also, lead these two and then switch Weezing out and get the Grimnay boosts or whatever. And the last one I put down here is just a hypothesis of mine. We saw Regieleki, like an offensive Life Orb Regieleki, thrive in Series 9, with its partner being either Friend Guard Clefairy or Shadow Tag Gothitelle. And the idea here was to just trap your opponent in next to this really fast offensive Dynamax Regieleki and just sweep them. I don't know if it's going to be something that people look to in Series 11, but it was really potent in Series 9. It was the best team, and it required that you team built around it or had answers to the Regieleki if you were going to attempt to beat it. Yeah, so that's the most common cores that I think you'll encounter, at least at the beginning, and give you some baseline for team building. The next thing I want to do in this video is just share a few sample teams for you all to try, or if you like them or not. The first one here is a Lapras team that I was using in Series 8. Life Orb, Water Absorb Lapras. You can use Light Clay Lapras and be really bulky if you want to. I personally liked Life Orb. This much speed allows you to outspeed max speed Amoonguss and most Incineroar that don't have a lot of speed investment, and Life Orb allows you to knock them out with Gmax or with Max Geyser. So I think being max special attack and Life Orb is really important. Freeze Dry hits Kyogre harder, and also allows you to get through other water types. The base power isn't that much different than Ice Beam. You're looking at a difference of 10 power in the max move, and if you run Blizzard, then you're looking at a difference of 20 power, but it's not the end of the world. And I like Perish Song over Thunder. You can run Thunder if you wish, but Perish Song allows you to get a couple of quick knockouts and then look to Perish Song the last two Pokemon away. It works nicely alongside Amoonguss and Incineroar as well. I think Amoonguss and Incineroar are probably the best two partners for Lapras, at least at the beginning. Once people start to team build around them again, you can switch it up. But Incineroar and Amoonguss are they're really good support duo together, and I think that they work nicely alongside what Lapras needs, which is redirection away from electric attacks and intimidate as well as fire coverage. Citrus Berry, I think, is the best item for this specific Incineroar. We've got Assault Vest taken and we've got Safety Goggles taken. So this is Citrus Berry comes up next in my opinion as a good item. You could run Shuka Berry as well, but we do have 2 ground immunities as well as a ground neutrality here, or 2 ground neutralities, and Lapras is really good against ground types in general. So I think that is probably the best item that's available still. I was using Snarl for a while. I did like it a lot, but obviously you can use Throat Chop or Taunt or whatever you want here. The only notable thing about this Incineroar spread is that it survives close combat from Intimidated Zation, so from neutral max attack Zation. Not Adamant though, but Jolly, max speed. Zation, you will survive close combat once you've intimidated it back down to neutral. And then 108 speed should give you the fastest Incineroar. If you're finding that it's too fast, you can drop it down a little bit and add some EVs elsewhere. But the big thing that I found when I was playing this archetype is that you want your Incineroar to be faster than your Lapras, because there are some times where you want to go for Flare Blitz before your Lapras attacks, and if your Lapras sets up Rain with Max Geyser, then Incineroar's attack will do less damage. So keep that in mind. Also, it allows you to like double up into Zations, right? You can Flare Blitz followed by Max Geyser into Zation. Should pick up the knockout, or at least break a potential substitute and then do a bunch of damage to it. Cobra Berry. We're going to be looking at Cobra Berry being really popular on these Pokemon again, just because Max Airstream is going to be really popular. So I think Cobra Berry is really good to start off with. We do technically have a Focus Sash available, so we could do some Focus Sash Amoonguss stuff, but ultimately I think Cobra Berry is a really good starting point. Pollen Puff favors this team so well with the screens that you get from Gmax Resonance. Just being able to heal up your Pokemon inside screens is really, really strong. Spore, Rage Powder are mandatory, and Protect allows for mind games, specifically in the Colossal matchup. If you lead Lapras Amoonguss, which is probably your best lead against Colossal, they have to choose which Pokemon they're going to attack and with which move. If they attack Lapras with a rock move, it does a lot of damage to Lapras. It might even knock it out. But if Amoonguss redirects that attack, it's not going to do that much. As well as, if they go after Amoonguss with a fire attack, you're going to want to have access to Protect. Really standard EVs, nothing special here. Zation, this was my EV spread that I used for Zation back in Series 8. This was a nice mixture of bulky as well as hitting a good point here for the attack jump that you get from Intrepid Sword. So I like Sacred Sword and I like Substitute. Substitute's really good on max speed Zation, just to be able to stall Dynamaxes, just keep substituting in front of them. Pretty standard stuff. Assault Vest Bulky Thunderous. This was something I fell in love with. That is a really good lead against Zation, as well as against, or with Zation to beat, to give it the same thing we talked about before: max Airstream boosts, max Knuckle boosts, etc. Additionally, this is probably the default lead against Calyrex, because that's what we have the dark coverage for. So you can lead these two, protect your Zation on turn 1, go for the max Airstream. This bulky set survives. It's really good against special attackers specifically, so I really liked it personally. And the last slot is Hydrigan. Safety Goggles Hydrigan with no Dragon attack. Protect, Dark Pulse, Flamethrower, Earth Power. This bulky EV spread was something that was shared to me by a friend who it was actually used by Pato and Aaron Trailer in some of their Desafio or Victory Road tournaments respectively. I don't exactly know what the EVs do, but I used them and I loved them. It's the sun check on this team basically. Like Lapras is really good against most of the elements of Sun with the exception of Venusaur. It's not great into Venusaur. Hydrigan is. Hydrigan resists every attack that Venusaur can come at you with, or is immune to the ground attack. It's not. It doesn't resist the poison attack, I should say, but poison is not going to be as strong of an attack. And you've got Flamethrower and Earth Power and Dark Pulse. I think those are the most important moves. Flamethrower allows you to hit Venusaur with super effective attacks. Earth Power boosts your special defense, and then Dark Pulse is stab. So this is the idea behind Lapras Zation. Next on the list here is Jonathan Evans's tournament-winning Kyogre team. There's a YouTube video out on Adi's channel. CK49 is the YouTube channel that you can check out the full. He has a really in-depth guide with Jonathan as to what this team actually does and how it works. But to paraphrase some of it for you here, it's basically the Venusaur is the strongest Pokemon in the format, right? And this team really showcases it. Basically, you can lead Grimmsnarl, Venusaur, do the screens thing, and then and then you have the Gmax Vine Lash that does chip damage every turn, and then you bring Tornadoes, Kyogre in the back, and you set up Tailwind late game for Kyogre to just deal Water Spout damage to everything and knock it out. The Torkoal is just kind of mandatory with Venusaur. It gives you a good matchup into this specific really bulky Torkoal gives you a good matchup into some of the physical attackers with Burning Jealousy. And the last Pokemon on the team is Metagross, just to kind of round out. Metagross is good into a lot of things. Weakness Policy works alongside your Grimmsnarl with Sucker Punch. And Max Steel Spikes, Max Quakes, things like that are really good. Weather Ball over Earth Power on this Venusaur is used because it one-shots Zation. Basically, in its entirety, if you can get Venusaur and Torkoal in. Torkoal's really good against Zation, and if you bleed these two and you go for a Weather Ball, then it'll knock out, or a Max Flare off of Weather Ball, it'll knock out Zation. So check out that YouTube video if you have more questions about it, but this is just a really standard team. C and Sense for water attacks. 228 speed is all that you need to outspeed Regieleki. Tornadoes with Heat Wave matches up better into Sun, I think is the logic there, and Life Orb lets it deal good amounts of damage. It's a pretty offensive team overall. Bulky Venusaur set to take advantage of the screens from Grimmsnarl. Bulky Torkoal and pretty standard Weakness Policy Metagross. Next up we have Traditional Sun. And this team I think is probably going to be one of the teams that you're going to see a lot of right away. There's some question marks in the team here, but I think the standard core is going to be these four. Citrus Berry Groudon, I think, kind of cemented itself as the best item for Groudon in this format, just because Groudon is so bulky. You don't have to run Citrus Berry if you don't want to, but I would encourage that, or like White Herb or Life Orb or something. I don't think Wide Lens is worth it personally, but entirely up to you. Venusaur with Coba Berry, same thing as Jonathan Evans's Venusaur, just a really standard set that does a bunch of damage. A Screens Grimmsnarl, this one opting for Scary Face over Sucker Punch, because it allows you to speed control your own Pokemon inside of your own Trick Room, as well as speed control your opponent's Pokemon for other things, for Groudon and such to hit it. Safety Goggles Incineroar for Sun, or for Sleep Powder stuff like Venusaur. And these four moves are pretty standard in my opinion. And this specific Incineroar, when you don't have dark coverage anywhere else, you want to run a dark attack of some kind. The last two Pokemon are kind of up for grabs. You basically want them to do exactly what these two Pokemon do. An offensive max Airstream user. This could come in the form of Landorus. This could come in the form of Zapdos, some teams used. But basically you want to be able to have an Airstream user that's offensive that works alongside this team. Solar Power Life Orb Charizard is just a nuker. It just does so much damage inside of Sun. So that's why I started with Charizard here. You can use Scorching Sands, you can use Solar Beam, you can use Ancient Power. Ancient Power is really good against opposing Charizards, but pretty standard EVs as well. I just EV'd for Life Orb Chip here, and then the rest in Special Attack. So nothing really standard. And then Porygon 2 with Trace and Foul Play Eerie Impulse, I think is probably the best Porygon 2 you can use. Um, Trace allows you to copy really cool abilities like Opposing Intimidates, um, and Foul Play plus Eerie Impulse allows you to still have good damage output without download, and Eerie Impulse is just like really good against special attackers, right? And then Trace, if you do Trace Intimidate, you've got a second Intimidate user on this team. Essentially, another Trick Room user that could be used here is Dusclops. Dusclops with Gravity is something really interesting with Groudon. Um, just to drop flying types to the ground, increase the accuracy of Precipice Blades. That's something you could consider, but Dusclops is pretty volatile into Calyrex dominated metagames, as you all probably know. A couple teams left here. I threw up this Rain team. This was a team that I think Mark Jackson used in the Players Cup 3. I really liked it. I thought it was a really, really solid team. I don't want to reiterate too much. It's just that Walk-On Berry is used here instead of the Focus Sash or Life Orb. And then Brutal Swing is used as another way to proc Metagross's weakness policy. And this is exactly what Mark Jackson had used. Rillaboom with Assault Vest. You could use Miracle Seed too if you wanted to. But I think this was the best. I think Assault Vest is still one of the best items you can give Rillaboom. And I forgot to update this, but this was just Life Orb. And it was Detect, Thunder, Bolt, or Thunder. You could do either one. Hurricane, and then Heat Wave. Those are probably the best attacks for Zapdos. And then you could do the same thing that I did with the other Pokemon, and that's just EV for Life Orb Chip. And then Focus Sash or Shifu. Super standard sets overall, but this was a team that I really liked that I think kind of checks all the boxes for Rain teams. One interesting thing I did see, talking about one of the combos that we talked about with Metagross, if you wanted to enable your Metagross more, you could run Miracle Seed Rillaboom, and you could change this Zapdos to a Raikou. Raikou still gives you electric coverage as well as Snarl, and it gives Bulldoze for Metagross. So you could just change this to Miracle Seed Rillaboom, and probably drop the U-turn for Protect. Raikou would give you Scald, Thunder, Volt Switch, and Bulldoze or something like that. Works as another way to enable the Metagross, and you still have a max Airstream user in Tornadoes. Just food for thought, something to consider. And the last team that I have here is a pretty standard Colossal team. I don't think anyone used this exact build, but I think that this build is fine. Basically, the idea is that you want to have Colossal, Incineroar, Colossal or Shifu, Rillaboom, and Incineroar make up a really good core, as well as Dragapult. Wolfglick used a support Dragapult. This one's Life Orb. This is a shout out to Marco Fierro's Dragapult Colossal Series 9 team, I think is what it was. But he was actually using a offensive Dragapult with Surf as well instead of Protect. So you have the option to Dynamax your Dragapult and deal a bunch of damage, or you can go for Surf. But you want to have two ways to enable the Colossal Steam Engine, or just an Aqua Jet way. So the reason why is that Tailwind's really prominent, as well as like, Calyrex Shadow naturally outspeeds Dragapult. So having an Aqua Jet user is much stronger in my opinion. You want to be able to enable Colossal as fast as possible and not have your Dragapult die to things that are faster than it, like specifically Calyrex and Zation to a degree. But I think Zation fits on this team really nicely just because you do have the extra. You have a Pokemon that has to Dynamax in order to be most effective, and you have a Pokemon that can't Dynamax. So that's the logic here. On these teams, I prefer really, really bulky Rillaboom. I like Knockoff as well, but really bulky Rillaboom. Just because Rillaboom covers Colossal perfectly, in my opinion, they're a really strong match. Colossal is weak to two things primarily. It has 3 weaknesses, I think. It might have more. Let me think. So it's weak to water and ground 4 times effective, which Rillaboom covers flawlessly. It's weak to rock. Is that it? Fire is weak to rock, ground, and water, which Colossus all weak to. Rock is weak to steel, which it's not thanks to fire. It's weak to ground, it's weak to water, it's weak to grass, which it's not thanks to fire. Yeah, so I think that's just the 3 weaknesses it has. It's just 2 of them are 4 times weaknesses, which Rillaboom covers really nicely. And then pretty standard the rest of the way. So yeah, these are some teams that I hope you I hope help you get the ideas flowing and the juices, kind of the team building juices going. Um, just kind of think about if you're looking to counter team build, think about these cores and think about ways to beat them. If you're looking for an easy team to get going with at first and then adapt as the meta adapts, start with one of these. These are just proven to work. But I'm going to try to get a video out here in the next day or so showcasing some teams that I might use that are variations of this or other teams I've had success with. I played a lot of Series 8. It was my first Players Cup that I qualified for, or second technically, but first one that I actually got to qualify for and then continue on into the main event. Um, and so I had some experience playing with um, a lot of these teams. I played with a lot of Lapras. I played with a good amount of Kyogre. Played with some Groudon, Colossal, things like that. So I'll have more teams coming in the next video, just some fun ones. But I hope this gets you a good starting point, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of Series 10 and get off, hit the ground running in Series 11. Catch you all in our next video.